Hello and welcome back. Today we look at Bedford and Lincoln Prison and their most notorious inmates. As always, we will start off with some history and then we will get straight into the cases. But first we start with Bedford Prison. It was built in 1801 and of course it's located in Bedford. The prison has had renovations in 1849 and 1990. It's a local prison holding Category B male prisoners who have been remanded from Luton Crown Court and the courts surrounding Bedford. The regime that the prison operates under offers work and education on a part-time basis. There is a resettlement unit within the prison. There's a library and a gymnasium available on a daily basis. The prison has a healthcare centre with 12 beds and 24-hour healthcare coverage. The prisoners who may be at risk from taking their own lives or harming themselves are provided a prison listener. In December 2009, the prison's own independent monitoring board issued a report citing concerns over the high number of prisoners serving life sentences being held at the prison. The report praised mental health care provisions and highlighted the staff morale, prisoners' property and the visits booking line of the prison. It also praised the levels of respect between staff and inmates at the jail, along with the prison's food and the hygiene standards. Despite this positive report, the prison has had a number of issues. In 2010, prison officer Donna Staunton, who was aged 27, was convicted after she had a relationship with an inmate. She had also smuggled a mobile phone, food, tobacco and newspaper into the prison for him. She was jailed for 2 years. During 2011 and 2012, Bedford Prison had the highest rate in any prison in England and Wales for inmates taking their own lives. 4 inmates had taken their own lives at the prison in a year out of a population of 465. The prison has been built to hold 322 inmates. An inspection in 2016 revealed that it actually held 495. Like many of the other prisons, it is severely overcrowded, and because of this, on Sunday the 6th of November 2016, there was a prisoner riot with 200 prisoners protesting against lockdowns due to staff shortages. Prisoners claimed accessing drugs was easier than accessing clothes or bedding in the prison. Basics like soap and toilet paper were not consistently supplied. The Independent Monitoring Board said that prisoners were not treated humanely before the riot. The numbers claiming they developed a substance problem while in prison rose from 4% to 14%. The riot caused £1 million in damage. In 2018, inspectors found that the prison was making insufficient progress. There were 116 assaults on staff during 6 months in 2018. Living conditions were bad and overcrowded, and there was insufficient proposals activities for prisoners. The inspector said, "Some of the accommodation in Bedford was the worst I have seen. The smell of mould in one cell was overpowering, with the walls damp to touch, while the underground segregation unit, which had held acutely mentally unwell men, was a disgrace. If our prisons are truly going to protect the public, then they must be able to play their part in supporting men and women to move on from offending." He said the men lived in squalor for 23 hours a day with no meaningful access to education, training or work, or to fresh air or exercise. It is not going to achieve what they want. The levels of violence and harm against their cells at Bedford was very high compared to similar prisons, with assaults against staff at the highest of any adult male prison in England and Wales. The findings of this inspection are unacceptable, which is why we are taking urgent action to address the concerns raised. Now we have looked at some of the history and what Bedford Prison is like now, let's get into the inmates. First we look at Nicholas Prosper. He was born on the 18th of December 2005. His mother was called Juliana and his father Ray. He had 3 siblings, his sister Giselle and his brother Kyle. He also had an older sibling that cannot be named because of legal reasons. Juliana lived with Nicholas, Giselle and Kyle after she had split with Ray. Nicholas Prosper was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder traits, and he was described as being a shy, geeky boy. He loved computers and he loved gaming. In his younger years, he had a group of friends with the same interests, but as he got older, he became more isolated. He fell into the internet instead. He became increasingly obsessed with taboo and, quite honestly, vile topics. Some of the topics he became obsessed with were crimes where lots of lives were taken, especially crimes that take place in American schools, and I'm not allowed to say. He visited lots of adult websites. His parents contacted his GP and his school, not because they knew the morbid topics that he would obsess over, but the isolation. But nothing really changed. He then dropped out of college and he fell further into the obsession of crimes at American schools. He also fantasized about being one of the infamous criminals and committing the same crime in his own primary school. He also became consumed with the game Telltale's The Walking Dead. The main plot of this game was there was a zombie apocalypse. Lee Everett, a convicted criminal, rescues a young girl called Clementine, whose parents had travelled to Savannah. They join with other survivors, and Lee promises to reunite Clementine with her parents while teaching her the rules of survival. In the game, you can make choices along the way, and this changes how you embark throughout the game and what ending you will receive. Nicholas became protective of the in-game character Clementine, and some of the choices would be taking the lives of characters in front of her, and he hated this. He liked to think that him and Clementine had a real relationship and connection together, and it wasn't healthy for her. In 2024, he was on lots of forums, and he was banned for supporting relationships between a minor and an adult, or relation with someone who had passed away. He went on to moan about the moderators and arguing he shouldn't have been banned. His comments were purely for educational purposes, but the ban remained. But by this point, he had already been planning an attack on his primary school. He idolised American criminal Adam Lanza, who was the culprit of Sandy Hook. He wanted to do the same, take the lives of his own family and then make his way to his old primary school. He said he wanted to take a minimum of 34 lives, so he was the highest in the world. He started to devise a plan in 2023. He pretended to be a parent who was new to the area and got information of the timetables at St. Joseph's School, his old primary school. He also walked around the school to monitor the gates and movement of the children and staff. He wanted to steal a firearm, but backed away from this idea. In June 2024, he forged a firearms license, and on September the 12th, he purchased a firearm, just in time before Friday the 13th, which is when he wanted to commit his crime. In the night and into the early hours of that day, he researched the same dark topics. From midnight until around 4:32 a.m, he looked at very extreme topics. The first shots he fired were a test shot targeted at a teddy bear in his bedroom. His mother awoke not at her usual time but a little earlier because of the practice, at around 5 a.m. She fought with her son and unfortunately he took her life. He then went into his sister's room. He uploaded a video onto a site called Mega as well as his YouTube, declaring himself to be a follower of Clementine, who was the fictional character from the Walking Dead game series. He was showing contempt for his sister Giselle for a specific in-game choice that she had made several months ago. Giselle woke up putting her glasses on after hearing the commotion. He then took her life. His brother Kyle was woken up. He grabbed a weapon to protect himself, but unfortunately this didn't help. He crawled out of the flat to get help, and then Nicholas took his life. Prosper then fled from the tower block between 5 and 6 a.m, and police arrived 30 minutes later as neighbours called them. He hid in a local area and assumed that they knew that he wanted to attend his old school and decided to hand himself in to the police. He was mistaken because the police knew nothing of his plot. The arresting officers, who had been on their way back to the station from the scene of the crime, noticed Prosper and arrested him after seeing stains on his face. During his arrest, Prosper said, "It's not murder." He was charged with 3 counts of murder, purchasing or acquiring a firearm without a certificate, and possession of a bladed article in a public place. Indecent images were also found on his phone, but due to the other charges, he was not charged in relation to them. In questioning, he responded no comment to everything. He was not regretful, and he was completely cold with no emotion. On his first court appearance on the 16th of September 2024, his father Ray Prosper shouted, "I still love you, son. It's not your fault, okay?" before bursting into tears. On the 24th of February 2025, Nicholas Prosper pleaded guilty to 3 counts of murder at Luton Crown Court, along with all other charges. Through his writings and conversations in prison, Prosper stated that he regretted not being able to take the lives of more people. He was sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum of 49 years to be served. Our next inmate is Chris Dennings, who maybe some of you recognise. He was born on the 10th of May 1941. He grew up in Oxford and was an only child. He has said that he was a rent boy from the age of 13 and remained so until the age of 18. His first radio experience was on a shortwave station in the United States as a teenager before travelling to Kenya to work on British Forces Network. He then returned to the UK in time to become the first announcer heard on BBC Two when it began broadcasting in 1964. He then worked for Radio Luxembourg and Radio London before presenting the Saturday afternoon programme Where It's At with Kenny Everett. He then became one of the original DJs on BBC's Radio 1, where he continued presenting Where It's At. Dennings was gay, and he said he was out when he was working at Radio 1. Dennings left Radio 1 in 1969 and worked for Decca Records for 2 years. He then became the number 2 producer at Bell Records and was involved in developing the careers of the Bay City Rollers and Gary Glitter. The next radio appearance was in 1997 when Radio 1 did a reunion with him, Terry Wogan and Tony Blackburn, but he spent the majority of his career running his own music and production business. But throughout his career he had a run-in with the law, and this eventually caught up with him. In 1959 he was jailed in Germany for sending images. His first conviction was for gross indecency and indecent assault. This was in 1974 and he was convicted at the Old Bailey, although he was not imprisoned. Before his conviction, he had been working for Jonathan King for UK Records, but King sacked him after the guilty verdict. Jonathan King eventually went on to be charged with SA of a child. During the 1970s, he was part of a group of offenders based around a disco for young people. It was called the Walton Hop. Other people that were included in this group were Tam Patton, the manager of the Bay City Rollers. He was later convicted of offences on children, as well as Jonathan King. They all became suspects in Surrey Police's Operation Arundel, an investigation focusing on offenders, which led to convictions against King and Denning. In 1985, he was imprisoned for 18 months for gross indecency with a minor, and in 1988 for 3 years for indecent assault on a 13-year-old boy, as well as possession of photographs. In March 1996, he was imprisoned for 10 weeks for publishing photographs. The following year, he was held in a prison in Prague. He was awaiting his trial in 2000, which convicted him of being an offender against 7 boys under the age of 15. He was released in 2001. After his release, he was wanted for questioning by Surrey police, but an extradition attempt by British authorities in the Prague City Court failed because the alleged offences fell outside of the Czech Republic's statute of limitation of 5 years, but Dennings was ordered to leave the country. He was arrested in August 2005 at Heathrow Airport after returning to the UK from Austria. He admitted to 5 charges of indecent assault of boys under the age of 16, dating back to the 1970s and 1980s. At the same time, a European arrest warrant was issued in December 2007, and in 2008 he was sent from the UK to Slovakia, where he was jailed in October for 5 years for producing images. These offences dated back to 2002 and 2003. He served his time and returned back to the UK. In June 2013, he was arrested in East London as part of Operation U-Tree. He was re-arrested and bailed out in September of 2013. In May 2014, as a result of the investigation, he was charged with 41 offences. In August 2014, he admitted to 29 of the charges in relation to offences committed against boys. In November, he pleaded guilty to a further 11 charges. In all, he pled guilty to 40 offences committed in the period of 1967 to 1987, relating to 26 male victims. The youngest was 9 years old at the time of the offence. In December 2014, the judge sentenced him to 13 years in prison. He was charged with another 6 offences from Operation Ravine on the 7th of June 2016. On the 22nd of August 2016, he pleaded guilty to another 21 offences between 1969 and 1986 against 11 boys. The youngest was 8 years old. On the 7th of October 2016, he was sentenced to another 13 years in prison. Denning passed away while in prison custody in Bedford Hospital on the 24th of June 2022 as a result of a bone infection. The prison investigated his passing. They found that when clinical readings first showed that he needed emergency care, he was not transferred to hospital for treatment. He was 81 years old. Now we look at Shaied Nazir, Ahmed Awan and Sarfraz Ali. They took the life of Ross Parker. Ross was born in 1984 to Davina and Tony Parker. His mother worked as a waitress and his father ran a car bodywork repair business. He was one of 2 children. He was an avid football fan and completed a GNVQ in business studies at school. He hoped to join the police force when he was 18. He was nicknamed Half Pint because he was 5'5" and had twice broken his leg. Parker lived in the Westwood area of the city and worked part-time as a bar support at a local public house where he had met his girlfriend, Nicola Toms. On Friday the 21st of September 2001, he finished work early. He met his girlfriend Nicola and they walked to visit her friend's house. At around 1:15 a.m. they were confronted by a gang of around 10 British Pakistani youths. Some of them were wearing face coverings. They had planned to find a white male to attack simply because he was white. At the time of the crime, there was a lot of hostility in Peterborough because of the attack that happened in New York. A lot of younger white residents of the city had real anger against the Asian community. This is obviously what was reported. They warned Parker he had better start running, but then blocked his path and quickly sprayed him in the face with a CS gas. He was then attacked with a weapon. His girlfriend Nicola ran to a nearby petrol station for help, and a man there gave her his mobile phone to call the police. While making the call, she twice heard Parker cry. By the chance, she spotted a police car passing. She entered the car and guided the officers to the scene. Although Nicola had only been away for a few minutes, unfortunately, he had lost his life. At that point, the gang had run away. It was reported that after the crime, the four of the gang returned to a garage which they used as their headquarters. Ahmed Awan held the weapon and exclaimed, "Cherish the blood." The police informed the Parker's family that Ross had passed away at 4:30 a.m. It revealed that he had passed away as a result of wounds inflicted by a bladed instrument. This crime sparked, which became one of the police's biggest inquiries in that city. During the weekend following the crime, 12 suspects of Pakistani descent were arrested on suspicion of murder. Members of the local Muslim community posted a £1,000 reward for information leading to the arrest of the killers. This was later increased to 1,500. The police said that the city's Muslim community were brilliant for their involvement in capturing the criminals. On the 26th of September 2001, Sarfraz Ali, Ahmed Ali Awan and Shaied Nazir appeared in court charged with the murder. However, by March 2002, all four had been released on bail. Ross's sister stated, "We can't begin to comprehend why they've been allowed out of the prison at this stage. They were concerned about the decision and they wrote a letter to complain to the Home Secretary. The Home Office refused to comment on the case and the men remained free on bail." On the 7th of November 2002, Awan, Nazir, Ali and another, Malrad, stood trial for the murder at Northampton Crown Court. Awan was 22 years old and ran a recruitment company. He had previously attended the city's Deacon School. He was also an unofficial police informer. The court was told that he thought of himself as a gangster. He knew Nazir, who was 22 years old. They were close friends. He was married the month prior to the crime and had a son. Ali, who was 25 years old, was also married. Although his wife left him during the trial, he ran a takeaway business. At the trial, the Conservative Deputy Mayor of Peterborough and the Labour Party councillor gave a reference saying that they knew him to be caring and responsible. DNA evidence was found, as well as recordings being played of the four discussing the crime. On the 19th of December 2002, Nazir, Awan and Ali were all found guilty of murder, with the judge concluding,
"You put your heads together with the purpose of arming yourselves and attacking an innocent man you might find by chance simply because he was of a different race to yourselves. A racist crime must be one of the gravest kinds."
All three received life sentences, with them to serve a minimum of 18 years. After the trial, it was revealed that Nazir had previously been cautioned for threatening behaviour in 1999 and fined for resisting arrest. The two politicians who wrote a nice statement were later jailed themselves for forgery in relation to vote rigging. And now we look at James Hanratty, who was born on the 4th of October 1936 in Kent. He was the eldest of four. By 1937, the family had moved out of Kent. As a child, he was described as slow and a pathological liar. His parents refused to accept that he was slow and successfully resisted attempts to have him placed in a special school. After leaving school in 1951 at the age of 15, he was illiterate and joined the public cleansing department of Wembley Borough Council as a refuse sorter. After falling off his bicycle and being unconscious for around 10 days, he then went to Brighton, where he obtained casual work on the road. 8 weeks later, he was found semi-conscious in the street, having collapsed from either hunger or exposure. He underwent a surgery and a diagnosis of the brain revealed that he had a hemorrhage, but no precise diagnosis was offered, and it's been suggested that he suffered from either epilepsy or another kind of syndrome. He was sent to an aunt's home in Bedford, a place he and his brother Michael had visited as children on holiday. He found a job there driving a mechanical shovel for a company called Green Brothers, which made breeze blocks, and remained with the firm for 3 years. At around 1954, he became attracted to Soho, where he frequented various clubs. On the 7th of September 1954, he was 17 years old, and this is when he first lived a criminal life and was charged. He was placed on probation for taking a motor vehicle without consent and for driving without a license or insurance. Afterwards, he began psychiatric treatment as an outpatient at a clinic. In October 1955, by that point he was 18 years old, he appeared again in court. He was sentenced to 2 terms of 2 years imprisonment for housebreaking and theft. He was dispatched to the youth wing of Wormwood Scrubs. He harmed himself and was placed in a prison hospital. He was declared a potential psychopath. After his release, his father resigned his job as a dustman in Wembley Council to start a window cleaning business with his son in an attempt to keep him away from the criminal world. On the 3rd of July 1957, at the age of 20, 5 months after his release from Wormwood Scrubs, he was sentenced at a Brighton court to 6 months imprisonment for a variety of motoring offences. This included theft of a motor vehicle and driving without a licence. He was sent to Walton Prison in Liverpool. He was diagnosed as a psychopath. His crimes continued. At the age of 21, he was sentenced to 3 years corrective training at Wandsworth Prison and then to Maidstone Prison. While at the prison, he came to the attention of a researcher who lived and worked alongside the inmates. He was later reported as saying that he had gross social and emotional immaturity. After a failed escape, he was transferred to Camp Hill Prison on the Isle of Wight. He attempted to escape that facility as well and was sent to Strangeways Prison in Manchester and then transferred briefly to Durham Prison. He was then returned to Strangeways after he served his full time. He was released in March 1961 at the age of 24, but these crimes were only the start, and these crimes led to more serious offences. At 6:45 a.m. on the 23rd of August 1961, Michael John Gregston was discovered in a lay-by near the Bedfordshire village of Clophill by John Kerr, who was conducted a traffic census. Lying next to him was a semi-conscious lady, Valerie Jean Story. Gregston had been shot twice. Story had been arred and then had been shot with the same weapon, but thankfully she survived. The police were alerted and they flagged down 2 cars and asked drivers to call an ambulance. The car Gregston and Story had been using at the time of the attack was a grey 4-door 1956 Morris Minor. It was found behind Redbridge Tube Station in Essex later that evening. The car had been jointly owned by Gregston's mother and aunt and lent to the couple who, according to Valerie, were planning to attend a car rally. Gregston was a scientist at the Road Research Laboratory in Slough. Valerie was an assistant at the same laboratory and had been having an affair, although this didn't come to public knowledge until it came out in an article written by Valerie. Valerie told police late in the evening of Tuesday the 22nd of August 1961 they were sitting in the car. A man tapped on the driver's door, and when the window was wound down, a large black firearm was thrust into her boyfriend's face, and then a Cockney voice said, "This is a hold-up. I am a desperate man. I have been on the run for 4 months. If you do as I tell you, you will be all right." The man got into the back of the car and told her boyfriend to drive further into the field and then to stop. At 11:30 p.m. the man said he wanted food and told her boyfriend to start driving. The gunman knew the Bear Hotel. He then was ordered to stop at a milk vending machine and sent into a shop to buy cigarettes and then to stop at a petrol station for more fuel. Although the couple offered to give him all their money and the car, the man appeared to have no plan and seemed to want to just stay with them. They drove around North London for a while. The journey continued when the gunman mistakenly insisted that they go to Watford. At around 1:30 a.m. on Wednesday the 21st of August, the car was on the A6 travelling south when the man said he wanted a kip. Twice he told the boyfriend to turn off the road and then changed his mind, and the car returned to the A6. At Dead Man's Hill, the man ordered her boyfriend to pull into a lay-by. At first, her boyfriend refused, but the man became aggressive and threatened him with a firearm. The man said he wanted to sleep and that he would have to tie them up. The couple pleaded with him not to take their lives. The man tied Valerie's hands behind her back and then took Michael's life. On the evening of Thursday the 24th of August, the firearm was found under the back seat of a 36A London bus, fully loaded and wiped clean of fingerprints, with it being wrapped in a handkerchief, which provided DNA evidence which would come in handy many years later. The police issued an appeal to boarding house keepers to report any unusual or suspicious guests. The manager of the Alexandra Court Hotel reported a man who had locked himself in his room for 5 days after the crime, and the police picked him up. Falsely identified himself as Frederick Durant. He was actually Peter Lewis Alphen, a drifter surviving on inheritance and the proceeds of gambling. He was the son of a senior figure at Scotland Yard. He claimed he had spent the evening of the 22nd of August with his mother and the following night at the Vienna Hotel. The police quickly confirmed this, and he was struck off of the investigation. On the 29th of August, Valerie and another witness, Edward Blackhall, who had seen the driver of the Morris Minor, created an identikit picture which was then released. On the 11th of September, 2 cartridge cases were found in the guest basement bedroom of the Vienna Hotel, which were matched with the firearm that took Michael's life. The hotel manager, William Nuds, made a statement to police naming the last occupant of the room as James Ryan. After investigating, Ryan turned out to be James Hanratty. He was 25 years old at this point. The police knew him as a petty criminal with 4 convictions for car theft and robbery. He had phoned Scotland Yard several times saying he had fled because he had no credible alibi for the date in question, but repeated each time that he had nothing to do with the crime. The police arrested him in Blackpool. On the 14th of October, Valerie identified him in an identity parade, after each of the men in the parade had repeated the phrase used in the crime, "Be quiet, will you? I'm thinking." He was charged with the murder of Michael. His trial began on the 22nd of January 1962 and lasted 21 days. He initially said that he had been in Liverpool on the day of the crime, but then halfway through the trial he changed his part of the story, claiming that he had actually been in North Wales. At that time there was no conclusive evidence to connect him to the car or to the crime scene. He also had no convictions that were violent. It was also said by Valerie that the criminal who committed this crime was a very bad driver. Actually, Hanratty was a very experienced and good driver. No defence on the basis of mental history was raised at his trial. He claimed that he was staying with friends in Liverpool. Despite the lack of any evidence, he was found guilty. He was sentenced to be sent to the gallows. A petition signed by more than 90,000 people was dismissed. He went to the gallows at Bedford Prison on the 4th of April 1962. His executioner was Harry Allen. He was initially buried in the grounds of the prison, but on the 22nd of February 1966 he was exhumed. He was moved to Watford, which was later shared with his aunt. In June 1999, the investigation was reopened. They used a handkerchief that the weapon was found in and took DNA from that and used that from his mother and brother. It was actually thought that this would clear him of the charges, but actually the results from the testing found a very high chance that it matched, although people still contest this conclusion. And now something a little bit different. We are now going to look at Lincoln Prison. If you want to skip to the most notorious inmates, the timestamps are all in the description. But let's get into a little bit of history of the prison. Lincoln Prison opened as a local prison in 1872 to hold remand and convicted prisoners. It replaced Lincoln Castle. Between the 1900 and 1961, a total of 18 inmates were sent to the gallows. In October 2002, inmates set fire to parts of the prison and seized control of at least one section of it. This was the largest riot in Lincoln Prison. The disturbance started when a prison officer was attacked by an inmate. A number of prisoners then jumped on the officer, assaulted him and dragged him into a cell and took his keys. It took prison officers 8 hours to bring the riot under control. In March 2003, the Prison Reform Trust issued a report claiming that the prison was unstable and suffering from inconsistent leadership. The trust also labelled the prison as the nation's most overcrowded prison. Its operational capacity as of April 2023 is 650 inmates. The Independent Monitoring Board conducted a report on Lincoln Prison in 2020. Within this report, it said prisoners incarcerated work in tailors' shops, gardens, the hospital and as cleaners. They can enjoy vaping and can use the gym. There's also qualification level 2s that are available in bricklaying, painting and decorating, catering, maths and English. Prisoners can even sit their theory test. There are also 2 well-stocked libraries with some books and CDs available in up to 50 languages. Overall, the prison is well run with a positive emphasis on the humane treatment of inmates and notes steady progress and improvements in the past 3 years, although it wasn't all positive. Inspectors remain concerned about the high level of self-harm. 614 cases in the reporting period and access for disabled prisoners due to the prisoner's age, as well as the prison's age. Another issue is the high level of homelessness of discharged prisoners. The prison's operational capacity was reduced from 729 to 664 at the end of January, but adds that 80% of cells being shared by 2 prisoners when they were originally designed for 1 inmate. As it stands, Lincoln is a Category B local prison holding adult male remand and convicted prisoners from the local courts. Accommodation at the prison is spread across 4 residential wings, A, B, C and E, and a segregation unit. Now that the little bit of history is done, let's get into the 2 cases we are going to look at. And first we start off with John Haigh. He was born on the 24th of July 1909 in Stamford. He was an only child and his parents were very religious and had a very strict upbringing. He was good at school and loved music. He joined the cathedral and was a choir boy. At a young age he dismissed his religious upbringing and after school he went on to be an apprentice at a firm of motor engineers. After a year he left that job and took jobs in insurance and advertising. At the age of 21 he was dismissed after being suspected of stealing from a cash box. He began to swindle. He would create insurance scams and do petty theft. He was convicted of fraud and spent some time in prison. He sold shares of a non-existent company by copying handwriting. He had become a well-established con man. On the 6th of July 1934 he married 23-year-old Betty Hammer. The marriage soon collapsed. The same year he was jailed for fraud. Betty gave birth to a baby girl while he was in prison, and she placed the baby for adoption and left him. His family then never spoke to him again. By 1950, the petty crime just wasn't enough. A chauffeur to William McSwan. William was a wealthy owner of amusement arcades. He also maintained the machines. He then left this job and then pretended to be a solicitor named William Admonson with offices in London, Guildford, Surrey and Hastings. He sold fraudulent stock shares. He also took from estates of deceased clients at below market rates. He received a 4-year prison sentence for this fraud. He believed the reason he was caught was because he left the people he was scamming alive and began to read up on different criminals who took the lives of their victims by using acid. He looked at George Alexandre Sarant, who was French and committed his crimes around Paris. This criminal used acid. He then started to experiment with mice and would note down the time it would take to dissolve. While living in Kensington, he would chat to Olive Deacon, who was 69 years old. She was a wealthy widow of solicitor John Deacon and a fellow resident at the Onslow Court Hotel. He made sure to become friends with her, and she told him about her business idea. This idea was artificial fingernails. He called himself an engineer and told her he was interested and his company would be willing to invest and help her with this business, so he invited her to his workshop. On the 18th of February 1949, Olive went to his workshop on Leopold Road in her Persian fur coat. She never returned to the Court Hotel. Once in the workshop, he used a firearm and took her life. He then placed her in a barrel with acid. He left her in there and went to the pub, then came back to finish the crime and clear the crime scene. She didn't turn up the next morning, so fellow residents at the hotel were concerned. He pretended to care. He said she never turned up to his workshop and hadn't seen her. He then went to the police with the other residents. He was the first one who was a suspect, so they searched his workshop. They found barrels of chemicals, but they were empty. They also found a firearm and a passport to no one who was related to him. They found a receipt from a cleaner's in London for a black fur coat. This coat was the one owned by Olive. He was brought in for questioning straight away, where he admitted he had used acid. He said the sludge was outside his workshop. He then told police he had used this method before, and Olive was not his first victim. William Swan was the first victim. As I previously mentioned, Haigh worked for Swan and then was imprisoned for fraud. After he came out of prison, he bumped into William in a Kensington pub. William introduced Haigh to his parents Donald and Amy. William worked for his parents by collecting rents on their London properties, and Haigh became very jealous of this lifestyle. On the 6th of September 1944, William disappeared. Haigh admitted to the police he had lured William into a basement and hit him over the head. He then put him in a barrel with the acid. 2 days later, finding that William had mostly dissolved, he emptied the drum into a manhole. He told William's parents that their son had gone into hiding in Scotland to avoid being called up for military service. He then began living in William's house and collecting rent for his parents. They became curious as to why their son had not returned, as the war was coming to an end. On the 2nd of July 1945, he lured the parents to his workhouse by telling them their son was back from Scotland for a surprise visit. There he took their lives. He used the same method. He then stole the pension cheques and sold the parents' properties for around £8,000, which would be about $440,000 in 2025. He then moved into Onslow Court Hotel in Kensington. He was a gambler, and by 1947 he was running short of money. To solve his financial troubles, he found another couple to take their lives and rob: Archibald and Rose Henderson. Rose had been married to a German inventor, Rudolf Ehren. After finding interest in a house that they were selling, Haigh was invited to the Hendersons' flat by Rose to play the piano for their housewarming party. While at the flat, Haigh stole Archibald Henderson's firearm, planning to use it in his next crime. He rented a small workshop at Leopold Road in Crawley, West Sussex. He moved acid and drums there from his other workshop. On the 12th of February 1948, he drove Archibald Henderson to his workshop, saying that he was going to show him an invention. When Archibald arrived, he then took his life. He then lured Rose Henderson to the workshop, claiming that her husband had fallen ill. He then took her life. He did the same method and put them in oil drums. He then forged a letter with their signatures and sold all of their possessions for £8,000, except for their car and dog, which he kept. These passports and documents were found at his workshop when police were investigating the disappearance of Olive. During the interview with the police, he said, "Tell me, frankly, what are the chances of anybody being released from Broadmoor?" He then admitted to taking the lives of 3 other people, a young man called Max, a girl from Eastbourne and a woman from Hammersmith, although the police never found any evidence of these 3 people. He tried to claim insanity to reduce his murder charges and not be sent to the gallows. He went on trial on the 18th of July 1949. He pleaded not guilty. His defence said he had committed the crimes but he was insane and he needed to be in an asylum. The defendant didn't know what he was doing and didn't know what was wrong. 3 psychiatrists examined him and only one thought he was insane, saying he had paranoia and delusion. The jury thought differently. He destroyed evidence and had profited, showing he knew what he was doing, and he was found guilty and sentenced to death. He was sent to the gallows on the 10th of August 1949. His executioner was Albert Pierpoint, and this happened at Wandsworth Prison. Our last inmate we look at is Frederick Nodder. This crime changed the English law in a huge way. The murder of Mona Tinsley was a prime case study cited in English law. The principle of no body, no murder was removed because of this case. The principle was simply meaning a murder conviction couldn't be obtained without a body. This was overturned in 1954. Mona was the main case study. Today, the current law in the UK allows for murder convictions even without the body of the victim, as long as there is sufficient circumstantial evidence to prove the crime. But let's get into the case. On Tuesday the 5th of January 1937, Mona made her way home from school, which was just a 20-minute walk. By 5 p.m. she had not made it home, so her father, Wilfred, knocked at friends' houses and local neighbours. Mona's parents then reported her missing. The next day she failed to return home, so the police launched a huge missing person investigation. Hundreds of volunteers looked at rivers and knocked most doors in the local areas, along with a massive police presence. Early on, 2 witnesses came forward and told police they saw Mona at the bus station with a middle-aged man. A 3rd witness said that he was the former lodger of the Tinsleys. Investigators also spoke to a bus conductor. He said Mona had got on the bus with a middle-aged man, but only he purchased a return ticket for himself. The parents let the police know that the lodger, Frederick Hudson, had dated Mona's auntie for a while. The parents had him staying at their home, but he didn't pay rent, so they kicked him out, but there was no argument, and their children called him Uncle Fred. His real name was Frederick Nodder, and he was 49 years old. He worked as a mechanic in Retford, but drank a lot and would be out of employment. They went to Retford where he was working, and they were given his address. The police questioned him on the 6th of January. They asked if he knew the child, and he said he used to know her, but not for a long time since his eviction. The day before, he admitted he was in the area but only looking for work and was on the bus alone. His own neighbours said they saw a young girl at his address on the day of the crime. His house was searched and his property was emptied, but they found nothing. Inside his house, a tissue was discovered to have been Mona's and children's drawings. A fingerprint found matched Mona's. In the bedroom, they found sweets. The next day, there was an identity parade, and every witness picked him. He was confronted and then said he did see her outside the school saying, "Hello, Uncle Fred," and then Mona asked him to take her to Sheffield to see her auntie, and he agreed. He let Mona stay at his home and changed his mind and gave Mona a shilling and told her to go to her aunt's. Mona's aunt used to date Nodder. He was charged with the abduction of Mona as they didn't find her. He maintained he was the only person to see her, and after 3 weeks they decided to contact Scotland Yard. The police came from London to help discover her. They then resurfaced ponds, rivers again, but they didn't find Mona. Nodder went to trial and was charged with the abduction. Nodder didn't testify and said she only spent 1 night. As Mona wasn't found, it was the only charge he could be on trial for. He was sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. The investigation continued as they wanted to charge him with murder. On Sunday the 6th of June 1937, a family were boating on a river when they spotted an object. Unfortunately, they discovered Mona. It was only 12 miles downstream from where Nodder lived. The post-mortem revealed that she had her life taken. On Monday the 28th of June, he was charged with her murder. His second trial was on the 22nd of November 1937. It was the same defence. The witnesses testified again, but this time they had found Mona. It lasted just 2 days and he was found guilty of murder, and there was no recommendation of mercy. He told the court he was innocent. The judge said, "Justice has slowly and surely taken over you." Frederick Nodder never confessed to taking Mona's life. He did launch an appeal against his sentence, contesting that the evidence presented against him at trial was purely circumstantial and not conclusive of guilt. His appeal was heard on the 13th of December before 3 judges. This was dismissed. He was sent to the gallows at Lincoln Prison at 8 a.m. on the morning of the 30th of December 1937. His executioner was Tom Pierpoint. And that concludes our video today. Lincoln Prison was actually a suggestion, so if you have any prisons or the local prison to you that you want me to cover, please let me know in the comments. As always, thanks so much for watching, and until next time.